Taking Control of iPhone Photography with Jeff Carlson. This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Backblaze. MacVoices listeners get a fully featured no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been too long since we talked to any Take Control authors. I think they're all underground, bringing out new books or working on new books. But that ends today because we have Jeff Carlson back to talk about a new Take Control book. Jeff, great to see you. It's about time.
Oh, it's so good to be back here always. But you're right, it has been a while. Although, we start talking and it doesn't seem like it's been a while. But busy days. So.
Yeah, well, there are worse things, right? So we're not just going to do a discussion about a Take Control book that's been out. This is a brand new Take Control book. This is Take Control of iPhone Photography. So, Jeff, you and I've talked about a lot of books and a lot of photography topics.
Yeah.
Why was it time to look at doing a specific book for iPhone photography?
Well, as it happens with a lot of Take Control titles, a number of things came together. In this case, this is going to sound corny, but it seems like the universe wanted this book, and I'm hoping that the actual the world also wants this book. But basically, we got I believe it was an email to our publisher, Joe Kissel, and they were talking about how we have my Take Control of Your Digital Photos book, which is all about organizing and finding your photos and all of that, sort of through the whole gamut of cameras and photo systems and all that. And then we have Jason Snell's Take Control of Photos book, which is all about the Photos app on the Mac and iPhone and iPad. And that's all about organizing and editing and using that app specifically. And they said, what I'm looking for is something on how to use how to use the camera in my phone and actually take pictures. We're like, oh, that's a good idea. And then I think that same day or the day after, there was a discussion on Threads among a few prominent people basically asking the same thing. And we'd been knocking around this idea as something that might be really good for the Take Control audience. And basically, things kind of came together because you have an iPhone, you are now a photographer. And I think we're all just sort of, what's a good way to say this? We're all just sort of absorbed that fact because, well, of course, there's a camera in my phone. Like, as long as we've had smartphones, there's been a camera, and it's just sort of been woven into our daily experience of using a phone. But of course, before smartphones, you were probably just a photographer and you had to get dedicated photo equipment, and some of it very expensive and some of it very complicated. Or maybe you had like a point and shoot camera that was easy to use, but all those things were separate devices. And so you had to be a photographer on the side. And now basically everybody who has a phone, which is almost everybody really, is also a photographer. So there's the aspect of having this in your hand, right? And we take snapshots of everything. I mean, how many pictures do you have in your photos library that is like the back of your car with the parking space number visible so that you know how to get back to it, right? Yesterday I had to mail something, and so I took a picture of the package right before I handed it over because I want to make sure that the company that this was something I was returning, make sure that they know that it actually went out in case anything comes wrong. So we have like this sort of documentarian aspect of having our iPhones with us. But the iPhone photo system is amazingly sophisticated. you can get really, really good quality photos. And this is something that, Apple has been pushing for quite a long time. I mean, they spend billions and billions of dollars on making the camera systems really good in the iPhones because people have realized that they want good cameras. They want to be able to take good pictures. So that's like part of it. But the other part of it too is, and I guess I'm at the risk of being like, and the other part, and the other part, and the other part. But the other part of this is the camera system has actually gotten fairly complicated in the last few years. It used to be pretty much like you had your camera, you took a picture, maybe you could zoom. Well, now, the iPhone Pro that I'm looking at right now has 3 cameras on the back. It's got one on the front. One of them has 48 megapixels of resolution. The other 2 don't. When does that come into play? How do you get the full resolution picture? If you're using, like, say, an iPhone 15, you may not even get a 48 megapixel image unless you do something specific. And so, like that aspect of it really pointed to this being a good take control topic because, yes, of course, you can pull out your phone, you can push the shutter button, you're going to get a great result. But there's a lot more to it. And there are a lot more things that are, sometimes there's a gotcha, and we can talk about these as we go along. There are things where you will be expecting one thing and you're not going to get exactly what you're expecting. Or you have a picture in your head and you say, how do I make this happen with my phone? Like, maybe I know how to do this with a traditional camera, but I didn't bring my traditional camera. I'm just, taking a walk downtown. So the idea of having a book that says, okay, here's how to use the camera system, and here's how to really, honestly take control of how to use it and how to take advantage of a lot of these features and situations and questions of, resolution and zoom and digital zoom and all these things that once you start taking pictures and you develop that eye toward being a photographer, we've talked about this a lot, you and I. You look at your pictures and you're like, okay, I like this. How can I make this better? And the answer to that used to be, well, you had to go spend a lot of money and buy better photo equipment and better lenses and better tripods. And that's not necessarily the case with an iPhone. You can be a casual photographer and make really good photos with like deliberate intent just by knowing a bit more about what it can do. And, God bless Apple, they have designed an app that is really designed for everybody. So there's stuff in there that, a few things that I didn't even realize were there until I started writing about it, because you take for granted how easy it is to take a picture and forget that there's actually a lot of stuff hidden in the app that can make things better, but they don't want to complicate things or overwhelm people. So that's my job. Read my book and then get overwhelmed and then know how to work through that so that you're not overwhelmed.
Okay, so first of all, I will offer a comment. About a year and a half ago, I was given the task of doing a retrospective for the company I was working for the last, 5 or 10 years. And over those 5 or 10 years, the predominantly used photo device was an iPhone. Mm-hmm. I was shocked as the years, that you went back that far and started coming forward, how much better the photography got. And it was it was not to say it was bad before by any means, but it just got progressively better. And so there have been some amazing advancements if you purchased phones over the year, and if you go back and look at things. And that, it's one thing to just hop back and look at a photo and then hop somewhere else and look at a photo. It's another one to say, okay, 10 years ago, 9, 8, 7, 6, and see the progression of improvement. All that said, I haven't had the benefit of your book. And so the phone itself has just been an amazing improvement all by itself. The idea that you can teach me to go even farther with it and utilize some of the things, and admittedly, there's some things that are a little confusing, like the 48 megapixels. Hopefully we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that you've got a book like this that can help me, because I'm like everybody else. Something interesting is in front of me. I pull my phone out. I'll select one of the lenses and tap, and then that's probably the extent of it. If there's something really interesting, I will maybe take a little more time. But sometimes I don't always know what I should be doing when I'm taking that little more time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So where does one start if they want to improve their iPhone photography? And we don't want to do the whole book here, but maybe you can get us started.
Yeah. Well, so actually this is a good opportunity to point out the structure of the book, because like everybody's approaching photography from a different place. Some people just want to take little snapshots. Some people have seen what the iPhone can do and they want to improve what they're doing, but they're not really sure where or how to do that. And so I very deliberately structured this in a way that it's not piecemeal is not really the right word, but it's like when you open this book for the very first time, there's a very basic start with the snapshot chapter. And it's just a couple of pages, and it's take out your phone. We're going to take a picture, and then we're just going to build on this so that if you know how to take pictures already, you can jump ahead to the intricacies of shooting in portrait mode or exposure compensation and all of those things. If you have not done anything more with your phone than just take a snapshot here and there, or you figure, I don't know, I get confused by all the different options, because honestly, like the camera app, they're just a whole bunch of icons and buttons and whatever. I don't know if I want to really do that. You can work your way up to it. And so, I know I'm just sort of like shilling the structure of the book, but one of the things that I really wanted to focus on was trying to open it up for everybody in terms of photographic experience or whatever. But it all really comes down to having that deliberate intent. And obviously I want everybody who's a photographer to see the world like a photographer. And when you're doing that through the prism of an app and cameras, it's a different experience. And so, you start to think about, all right, how are things composed? How is the lighting here? I want to take a picture of a friend of mine, but I know that the portrait mode will blur the background, but I don't want it to be super blurry. Or the sun is like really bright and it seems like a perfect day to take a picture of somebody. And then you take a picture and half their face is in shadow. What do I do about that? Well, the answer to that is like you move into a shadowy area, which is non-intuitive for somebody who doesn't really take pictures, because you're like, no, I want to take advantage of light. But it turns out when you put them in shadow, then the camera can take advantage of that and you get more even lighting and things like that. So it really just sort of builds on what you're seeing and what the camera is seeing, and some of like what the camera is doing. Because another part of iPhone photography is it's very good at trying to make the best image. And sometimes you don't want the best image. Sometimes you want to override its desire to put everything in focus or have everything exposed correctly. I mean, that's fine if you just want to make sure that I have a good photo that's recording this moment, but maybe you want more character to it. And there are different ways to add character, or different, the photographic effects and things like that. I think I just like covered way more than what you were asking for, but
no, but your comment about you may not always want the best picture is intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit, because I always want
Yeah.
the best picture. I thought.
Right. Well, yes, you do. So what the iPhone cameras are really designed well to do is to take pretty much any scene and expose it, quote unquote, properly. So you don't want anything that's too dark. You don't want anything that's too bright. If you have sort of a general lighting situation, right? So we're not pointing directly at the sun, or we're not dealing with anything with super dark shadows. Like you just have your sort of basic scene in front of you, and it will try to make sure that that is exposed properly, which means nothing is too dark, nothing is too bright. You've got really nice saturation in the colors and all of that, and that oftentimes is great. Like that will make a good picture. But when you're looking at a scene, maybe you don't want that. You want some of those deeper blacks. You want to take advantage of the fact that maybe there's a cool angular shadow that's coming across a building, and if the phone is trying to bring up all the details in those shadows, that's not really what you're going after, because the drama of that picture was this raking darkness coming across the composition. So what do? If you have a traditional camera, there are lots of things you can do. You can increase the shutter speed to make the basically let less light in. You can change your aperture to make the background either more blurry or more in focus. There are all of these different things that the iPhone is mostly programmed to not have you worry about that, because it is intended for people who don't know anything about aperture or shutter speed, and they don't want to know. They just want to take a good picture. So when you're looking at a scene and you think, like, there's something artistic about this, and I don't even mean like capital A artistic, this is going to be a museum quality piece, but when you looked at a scene and you said, what's really striking about this is not that this is a building in the middle of downtown Seattle. What's striking about this is that the shadows from this other building are hitting it in such a way that it caught my eye and made me want to take this picture. And if the phone is sort of going against that, what do I do? And like in that case, there's a control where basically you can tap the screen to set your focus point, and that sets also the exposure. And there's a little slider that's next to the focus point. You can just move your finger on there and drag that down, and that will just reduce the exposure of the whole image. So you're taking advantage of some customization, but not in a way that a traditional photographer would necessarily know how to do if they didn't know how this is the iPhone's way of doing it.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by Backblaze. MacVoices listeners and viewers get a fully featured, no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Go right now and see how easy it is to protect yourself from nasty surprises. I don't know about you, but I like things that are automatic, that I don't have to think about, that I can depend on. Backblaze checks all those boxes to keep my critical data safe in the event of an unexpected, unfavorable event. My Mac is set up with Backblaze to back up continuously, so that as I work, things are constantly being backed up. I could have it set to be done once per day or only when I choose to do it manually, but I don't want to take any chances with anything. And all my deleted files and versions are stored for a year, so I can go back and retrieve that particular item that I thought I wouldn't need from last July's board meeting. It's like increasing your drive space on your Mac to store things that you thought you might need. And I can even upgrade to have those files retained forever. I have the performance on Backblaze set to automatic threading throttle, so Backblaze uses my CPU and bandwidth when I'm not, and adjusts down when I am. Again, automatic. Backblaze is an essential part of my personal backup strategy, and it should be part of yours too. Unlimited storage, deleted file and version retention, automatic throttling and threading, and all automatic in the background. MacVoices listeners and viewers get a fully featured, no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Go right now and see how easy it is to protect yourself from those nasty little surprises. Backblaze.com/MacVoices. You will only ever regret not doing it. Thanks to Backblaze for supporting MacVoices.
Does that make sense?
So we're talking about overriding some of the computational photography settings.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, with the iPhone, you're always dealing with the computational photography. The only way that you can really knock those out is if you use a third-party app, and I talk about that some too, where you have true manual controls. But with the with the camera app, and I should probably point out, like the book, except for that one chapter, really just covers the camera app because that's what most people are going to use. Honestly, I have lots of third-party apps that I can use and that I do use occasionally. But when I'm taking pictures, even when I'm doing photos with intent, like I said, I'm using the camera app because it's super easy to get to. It does most of everything that I want. But occasionally, you really want manual controls. You want to be able to say, I want the ISO to be this number, and I want the shutter speed to be this number, and I want to manually focus on something. That's when you would go for a third-party app. The camera app, it really doesn't have that for you because it's being smart. It says, okay, I can see what the exposure is like in this scene, and I know that in order to capture this, it needs to be 1/200th of a second at ISO 450, and then it like takes that and then also does its computational stuff where it's merging a bunch of different exposures at once to get to deal with noise and to deal with the different light levels, and even to the extent where it'll take portions of the sky and expose them differently and then blends it all together. So like there's a lot of very cool stuff happening, but that might not be what you want as a photographer, as someone who is there to capture the thing that you saw. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all that happens so fast, usually, that you have no idea what all's going on. But in those super low light moments, when the phone says, hold me still, and it, for lack of a better phrase, develops a picture right in front of you. I mean, is that's sort of a slower process because it's doing even more. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's the night mode, which is an intriguing and super cool thing. Like what the phone can do in low light situations is often so much better and easier than what you can get with a traditional camera. It's almost unbelievable because there are times where the phone can get a really good shot handheld that if you had another camera, you'd have to put it on a tripod, you'd have to set a long exposure, and like it just becomes more difficult. And so like in night mode, like you just mentioned, what it will do is it will take a long exposure. So it'll say 3 seconds and hold still, and it gives you a little targeting reticle in the middle, so you can try to keep everything all lined up. And it'll give you a nicely exposed, but not overexposed, which is one of the nice things about the iPhone system. But then you'll also have things that are still in focus. And that is something that is very hard for other cameras to do because they're pretty much just saying, all right, I'm going to open the shutter and just let a bunch of light in for, however many seconds that you've determined that you want it to stay open. And the phone is like, yeah, we're going to do that too, but we're also going to blend a whole bunch of stuff so that we don't have a whole lot of noise. We don't have, motion blur and things like that. But coming back to the idea of overriding what the phone is doing, there might be times when you want a longer exposure. So one of the things that it will do is it's always looking at the scene and it's always evaluating what the light levels are. And so in a night mode situation, you might be holding your phone and, you'll be going like this, and it knows that you are holding it because you're, making little micro movements. And so it'll compute like, all right, for this scene, it's going to take a 4-second night mode exposure. Well, maybe you want something more. Maybe you actually want it to be brighter. If you then put the phone on a tripod or a stable surface and are not moving it at all, then that amount can go up to as high as like 30 seconds. And you're like, all right, well, that's fine. What does that get me? If you're in a really, really dark environment, that could mean not getting the shot because it can't do it handheld for that long. But if you can keep it steady, then maybe you do get the shot. And we're talking like super dark, like maybe you have, one light source slightly far away. I was, doing experiments and screenshots in my living room, and I basically turned off everything, and it was about midnight. It turned off all my lights, and I believe I had like one, like the light above my oven in the kitchen in the next room, and then whatever light was coming in through the windows. And with I want to say 23-second exposure with the iPhone on a tripod, it made a really good, still dark, but really good, clear image of some flowers that I was shooting. Another really good example of when this would come in handy is night sky photography. So you can take good pictures of stars with the iPhone, which is just almost unbelievable, because to get good night photography, you want, like, ideally, a full frame camera with a big old sensor and a good lens that'll let in a whole lot of light, f1.4 or f1.2 aperture. And you put that on a tripod and you do long exposures. The iPhone, like, I took a picture last year, I think, where like you could see the Milky Way and the stars and like all of that. And it ended up being like maybe a 20-second exposure with the iPhone, because all my camera stuff was packed away. My friend Mason Marsh and I, we were out on a photo weekend up in the North Cascades of Washington. And like we were done for the night, and we were in a camper van, and like he was cooking dinner, and so I was just wandering around with my phone, and the sky was clear and beautiful. And so I was just like, I don't want to get out all of my other photo equipment because I'm kind of done for the day, but I'll just kind of see what happens with my iPhone. And I got this great shot, and it's not something that I would have gotten otherwise. So
just hearing you talk about it makes me want to pick up the phone and go experiment.
Yes.
And learn more about it, because I can think of some photos I've taken that I really like. I have to wonder if maybe if I paid a little more attention or had a little more knowledge, that if I could have made them even better. And what does better mean? I don't even know what better means. Whether the image can be more intense or more, I hate to say saturated, because that really doesn't convey what I'm thinking. But just the idea that we're not talking about doing this after the fact in this photo software or that photo software, or even what's built into the camera, but just the idea that I can start with something better is really inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one of those things where when you know what the camera can do, then you know how you can manipulate it to certain ends. So when you know that it will, of course, I can't think of a good example right now, but when you know that it will take a long exposure at night, or when you know that it will. No, seriously, I have no example for you.
That's okay, because but I get it. The idea that just if you have that capability, then you start to look at it with that photographer's eye that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, so all right. So here's an example. when we're talking about exposure, I'm going to go back to the idea of you're at a location and you take a picture, and it's not as punchy or contrasty. Like it might be a little overexposed for what you want. Like technically, if you were to look at the histogram, it's properly exposed, but maybe that's not what your eyes are seeing, or what the image in your head was. All right. So you determine, because you know how the phone works, that what you need to do is just reduce the exposure a little bit. Okay, that's fine. So there's the one method that I talked about, where for each shot you can tap and adjust the exposure by itself. One feature that I think this is funny. This is a feature that's been in the camera app since the very first iPhone with a camera was released. And I keep running into people who I mentioned this and they're like, wait, it can do what? So let's say you adjust that exposure. If you touch and hold the screen for like 2 seconds, it will lock the exposure and lock the focus to that point. So then you can say, like, lock this focus, and then you can adjust the exposure. And then you can move the camera and maybe reframe what you want without it automatically trying to think, okay, well, he's moving the camera, so now I got to find a new focus point and I need to recalculate the exposure. So you can lock that into place, and maybe the thing that you wanted wasn't composed in the way that you wanted. So you decide, like, I just need to move this over here, but I don't want everything else to change. So you can lock that. Okay, so that's one part of it. But then the other part is, okay, I'm not just going to take one picture because I am, at a beautiful location and I'm going to take a bunch of pictures, but I don't like that the phone is giving me kind of a bright exposure for this. So there is an actual exposure compensation button, which is hidden in the little row of advanced controls. You have to tap there's a little caret icon at the top. And then that brings up these other controls that I think, honestly, most people don't even know they're there because they're always hidden. And you can set your exposure compensation to say, maybe, exposure -1. So everything's going to be a little bit darker than what the phone wants to do automatically. Well, once you have that set, then it's going to stick for the other pictures that you're taking. So then you can go ahead and, move around and refocus, and it will always be at that lower exposure. And this is just something that I had a vague idea that was there until I started playing around with it. And it even gives you this itty bitty tiny histogram that will show you oh, there are some areas that are way too dark or some areas that are way too bright. Didn't know that was there, but it can be super helpful because what you want to be doing is focusing on getting the shot and not have to adjust the exposure after every single shutter press that you make. So it's like, when you know what the phone can do, what the camera can do, and you can set that, and then you can let your mind and your eye wander and say, all right, now that I've got the exposure that I want, the look that I want, now I can go look for details and compositions. Maybe this waterfall over here would look good on the left side of the screen instead of the right side of the screen. Maybe there's a tree over here that would balance that correctly, and all of that. And you're not having to figure out all the technical details every single time. You can take that, say, all right, this is the look that I want, and now what can I take a picture of? What draws my eye? What captures my attention?
While you were talking, I was just tapping the little caret. I've seen those controls before. I had no idea what they meant. More importantly, though, I had no idea how I got them.
Yeah.
So I've seen them, and at some point, you forget they're there. So that's a great tip right there, if nothing else. I did want to ask a question about the lock. That if you lock focus, how long does it stay locked? I mean, do I have to unlock it at any point, or after I take a picture, do I have to relock it for a second picture?
Yeah. I think it It'll stay locked until you take the picture. So you can lock the exposure and focus and then move around. Then you'll take the picture and then I think it resets.
Resets. Okay.
I think.
Okay.
And I mean, that's why the other exposure compensation control is there, because it's like the one that you're touching and adjusting is really just sort of shot to shot. And the other one is, okay, look, I don't want to have to keep doing this over and over again. So here's a way to do that.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.